Hey, what is going on, everybody? Hope y'all are doing well this Sunday morning. Wild weekend of college football. Week two. We've got reactions to all the games that happened yesterday. But this is episode one of the Gridiron Rundown podcast. I'm your host, Jordan French. Make sure you guys subscribe to the channel. We've got links to all of our social media feeds down below. Make sure to follow, subscribe. It would really help me out. I would appreciate it a lot. But yeah, week two was crazy. Today we've got week one of the NFL. In terms of football, I'm sure it'll be great, but hopefully it can live up to some of the hype that the college ranks have given us these first 2 weeks. Pretty crazy results. We're going to get into a couple of the games, some big takeaways that I have from a few of them. Ultimately, though, it is still only week two. These are college teams, young players, so what we see right now is probably not what we're going to see, by week 10. Some teams that look really good right now are probably not going to look as good, and some teams that look pretty bad are probably going to end up being pretty good. But that also doesn't mean that teams that look bad right now won't also look bad later on, and the good teams won't still look good. Wild weekend. Let's start with, I guess I guess we'll start with the game of the night. Not only on paper, but in my opinion, was the game of the night, or game of the day too. Oklahoma versus Michigan. Oklahoma won 24-13. As an Oklahoma fan, I love to see it. It felt good to have validation that we actually have an offense this year, after what happened last year. And I know a lot of people want to blame Brent Venables for that, and what happened last year is a totally different thing. I could spend hours on that, but felt good to have offense back in Norman, because it's not just that our offense looked pretty good, it was that our offense looked pretty good against Michigan, who, unless they've fallen off a cliff because they didn't really play anybody last week, so this was their first test too, but unless they've fallen off a cliff, that's a pretty good defense that they have. Um, and it's not like we, excuse me, moved up and down the field on them at will, but we, for the most part, Oklahoma had no problem, no real problems moving the ball offensively. Um, but I don't know, dude. John Mateer looks like the real deal. Um, and maybe the biggest thing was Oklahoma's offensive line looked pretty good against Michigan. Now it wasn't great. It didn't dominate, you know. It didn't look like, the greatest offensive line in college football, but they held their own against Michigan for the most part. There was a couple of instances there, especially like third quarter and like early in the fourth, where Wink Martindale, the Michigan defensive coordinator, was dialing up some edge pressure, and Oklahoma had a little bit of trouble picking it up. Um, but I mean, for the most part, they held their own. Especially that final drive for Oklahoma. I think it was like an 8 or 9 minute drive to ice the game. And I think they ran the ball. I know they ran the ball majority of the time, but I think it was like 15 plays, I want to say, or something like that. And I think like 11 or 12 of them were runs. So uh, Oklahoma looked really good. Their defense looked really good. They probably should have given up more points and yards than what they did. Venables was very aggressive, did not believe that Bryce Underwood could beat them deep. And aside from the one play where he did, he didn't. And Venables was essentially in cover zero the entire game. And Underwood had chances to make him pay. And short from a David Tyree-esque catch down the field on a helmet, Michigan couldn't do anything with it. So I don't expect Oklahoma to be that aggressive against other teams, but work tonight. Oklahoma's defense looked good. Very, very physical game, hard hitting game. Um, yeah, it felt good to see Oklahoma have an offense again. And even though Michigan struggled at times on offense, you could see the potential there. And I'm sure Michigan fans probably, or they should be feeling okay after this game. That's a very good Oklahoma defense. Michigan was without their tight end. Their receivers really aren't that great. Aside from the one receiver, I can't remember his name right now, but the one that made the helmet catch, he's pretty good. Aside from that, they just didn't have any weapons. But Michigan's going to be fine. They should load up on talent this offseason. Bryce Underwood, and Michigan's going to be a pretty big competitor heading into next year, in my opinion. But Oklahoma looked really good. They dominated. Dominate is probably not the right word. I guess they were just in control of the game. Like, never really looked like there was a chance Oklahoma could lose. There were a couple moments where it was like, Oklahoma doesn't do this here, it can become a battle. But Oklahoma they never shut the door and ended Michigan early, but they also never really swung the door wide open and allowed them to get back in the game. That door was just kind of cracked the entire time. But Oklahoma, again, looked really good, shot themselves in the foot multiple times. Special teams was horrendous for Oklahoma. They had a muffed punt, gave Michigan a field goal. They muffed a kickoff return, although we were able to recover it, but started out on our own 5 because of that and killed the drive. There was a running into the kicker or roughing the kicker on a punt that gave Michigan a first down on a third or fourth down. It was 4th and long, too. I think it was like a 4th and 10 or something like that. And I can't remember if Michigan got a field goal out of that or not. I know the muffed punt they did. But, Mateer had an overthrow that led to an interception on a receiver that was wide open. Isaiah Satania had a wide open drop on a 3rd down that killed a drive. So Oklahoma made it. I'm sure Michigan, there were things Michigan could have cleaned up, but if both teams played perfect tonight, like to the best that they possibly could have tonight, Oklahoma would have won this game by 3 touchdowns or more. So I feel confident. Obviously, shoulda, coulda, woulda. I'm not saying that Oklahoma's 3 touchdowns better than Michigan necessarily, but tonight they were. Just didn't reflect in that because they shot themselves in the foot. Missed field goal as well. Forgot about that. Comes to special teams. Which Michigan had one as well. But yeah, Oklahoma looked good. Excited to see them play. Next week won't really matter. But they do have the matchup with Texas coming up and a matchup with Auburn. And then on out, that schedule is brutal. But from what I saw tonight, or I guess last night, I'm recording this in the morning. Not that I'm not projecting Oklahoma to go undefeated, but I also don't think there's a game on the schedule that they cannot win. Like, there's not a team in the SEC, and maybe even the country, that they couldn't win. Not that they'd even be favored to win, but just that, like, you can't feasibly see them, winning the game. They could beat anybody. But we'll see how they continue to grow. They're going to be an exciting watch for the rest of the year. All right, moving on. Let's talk about Oklahoma's rival, Texas. Put up an instant reaction to this game. Texas won pretty handily. If you look at the scoreboard, 38-7. But I talked about this in the instant reaction. There was about 5 minutes of game time, give or take, like the end of the first quarter, beginning of the second quarter, where Texas, I think they had 4 touchdowns, so 28 of their 38 came during that time. Outside of that, I mean, you can simple math, scoreboard, it was 10-7. And Texas wasn't taking their foot off the gas. They were trying to score with Arch and couldn't outside of that 5-minute stretch, even late in the game. Even when they took Arch out for the final possession, maybe final 2 possessions, I can't remember if the backup got 1 or 2 possessions. They were trying to score. And in fact, I had Texas covering the spread And Texas was actually going to because they were still driving and throwing the football with about 2 minutes left in the fourth quarter, up 38-7 with the backup, and the running back fumbled. Otherwise, Texas would have had first and goal on like the 8, 9, 10 yard line. So Texas probably would have covered. But the point to that is Texas was still trying to score. And outside of that 5 minute stretch, they struggled to score against San Jose State. Just like they struggled to score against Ohio State. They struggled to block San Jose State. Arch struggled to make the right reads and read the defense consistently. He did do some good things. Again, that 5 minute stretch, he was nearly perfect. The offensive line was nearly perfect during that 5 minute stretch. The receivers looked amazing during that 5 minute stretch. The defense, while the defense looked good all game long, it looked elite during that 5 minute stretch. Give or take 5 minutes, however long it was, 6, 7, 8 minutes, whatever. Game time. Actual time may have been like 20 or 30 minutes, but game time, it was, I don't know, man, pretty eye-opening. Arch has got to be better, but it's not just on Arch. Like I said, they struggled to block San Jose State at times. Their receivers had drops today, struggled to get open at times. I don't know, man. Texas, they have a couple more tune-up games. They have Florida, which we'll talk about later. That game may not be as difficult as I originally thought it was, even 24 hours ago. But if the night or last night was any indication, if Texas brings that offense to the Red River Shootout, Oklahoma will wipe the floor. Now, it is a rivalry game, so even if Texas does end up being quote-unquote bad this year, we've seen Texas be bad before in the Red River Shootout, and it be a game. Hell, two of the last 4 years we've seen, or, not two of the last 4, last year. The other one was a different situation, but last year, Oklahoma was awful. And the first half of that game, Oklahoma was giving Texas everything they wanted. Oklahoma should have been up double digits in that game in the first quarter. So, you can't go off like this team is clearly better. But just saying, based on what we've seen through 2 weeks, if Texas does not improve, I don't know how anyone could convince themselves they'll beat Oklahoma. And if you can't beat Oklahoma, you're probably not beating Georgia. That alone is 3 losses. And those being, Oklahoma, Georgia, Ohio State, your 3 biggest games of the year. Probably not getting into the playoff. And then that's not even including Texas A&M, Vanderbilt, who looks pretty good, Florida, who I don't even know. But I mean, when your offense looks like that, you can lose to anybody. I mean, we saw it with Oklahoma last year. Now, Texas looks better offensively than Oklahoma did last year, but it's the same principle. Your offense has to be able to consistently move the football. 5 minute stretch, a burst where, you outscore a team 28-0, great. But, if the other, however many minutes that is, just you got to be better. Despite everything that I've just said, I do feel like Texas will figure it out. But I also thought Texas would figure it out this week. And again, 5 minute stretch they did. The rest of the game they did not. So that'll be interesting to watch. Arch is still a young quarterback, and I know Manning is his last name, so unreal expectations. But I mean, look last year when Arch came in against a bad team. He didn't look this bad. So I don't know. That's going to be interesting to see. Week 2 brought a lot. Moving on, we mentioned Florida. Let's just go ahead and talk about them. Does Billy Napier make it through the season? I don't know. Obviously in the NIL era, it's more difficult to fire coaches. because you got to do the buyout, still got to pay for your players, and then you got to bring in a new head coach, and that's just the head coach. You got all the coordinators, the support staff. How many of them are leaving? How many of them would stay? Um, and then most teams have a GM now or some sort of director of player personnel, something like that, whatever colleges want to call it. Do they stay or go? So expensive. I haven't looked up Billy Napier's buyout, but that's not good, especially with Florida's schedule. Like, struggle with South Florida. And listen, South Florida is just one of these group of five teams that you just, on any given Sunday, can just make any team in the country look bad, air quotes. But it's really the way it happened. I don't know, but maybe South Florida's just that good. I mean, they beat the hell out of Boise State last week, which I didn't think Boise State was going to be that good anyways, but they were technically ranked. I think they were ranked 25th, right? Boise State. Um, so we'll find out more about South Florida this week. Um, who do they play? I can't even remember right now who they play. It's a pretty good team. Let me see. Who does South Florida? Uh, they play Miami. That's right. They play Miami. So we'll get a good look at South Florida. Miami beats them by 40, which they're very capable of doing. Then that's going to look real bad for Florida. I don't know. I mean, maybe South Florida's just that good. Um, I didn't watch a ton of this Florida game. I did late. Early on, I was watching other games, focusing in on other games. I was flipping back and forth, but I don't know, man. Florida, and the penalty at the end of the game, bidding on a player, first of all, dumb thing to do at any time, but especially what? See, Jalen. So Thursday was the NFL game. 2 days, not even a full 48 hours, because that was a night game and the Florida game was an afternoon game. Not even a full 48 hours after what Jalen Carter did, you do the same thing. At least when Jalen Carter did it, though, the one thing I will say is Jalen Carter did it before the game. He didn't do it in the fourth quarter with the game on the line and a game-winning drive. Can't do that. It's reminiscent of Florida, the throwing the shoe against LSU. Like, what are we doing? Like, what are you doing? You, I don't know, man. Billy Napier, I don't know. Florida just, they're one of those weird teams. Um, they kind of like, I don't know. I mean, very reminiscent of other teams that we've seen where these, maybe like, uh, I don't know, reminiscent of like a Jimbo Fisher team, maybe. Like or like Hugh Freeze at Ole Miss. If they play the number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 team in the country, great chance to win. Any other team in the country, you don't know what you're going to get. And I do mean literally any other team in the country. So, but it is only week 2. Not going to fully panic. I'm not going to panic in terms of like how actually talented and how actually good Florida can be. That part, I'm not going to panic yet. Similar to Texas. But in terms of what their record could be and the ceiling for the team, not in terms of talent, not in terms of how well they play, not in terms of eye test, but ceiling in terms of record, that's where I'm starting to panic. Because you've already lost to South Florida. You still have Miami. I'm pretty sure Florida plays Miami. I'm pretty sure they play Florida State. I know they play Texas, as well as a slew of other teams through the gauntlet. I don't have their schedule pulled up right now, but it's just It's ridiculous. They're right up there with Oklahoma for the toughest schedule in the country. And because of the way Miami looked and the way Florida State has looked for the first 2 weeks, Florida has the toughest schedule in the country when you factor in non-conference. Conference schedule is Oklahoma still, but total schedule, Florida has the toughest schedule in the conference, and you already have a loss in the first 2 games of the season, and one of them is South Florida. In fact, I'm pretty sure Florida plays LSU this coming weekend. Which we'll talk about LSU here in a second, but I don't know, Florida. You got to figure it out. I was actually very high on Florida, especially after last week. Granted, they didn't play. They played a nobody team I'd never even heard of. But I don't know. Figure it out, Florida. Billy Napier coaching for his job yet again. Last year, when it seemed like he was guaranteed to get fired and coach for his job, Florida turned it around and looked like a top 10 team in the country. So maybe that's just who Billy is. He needs his back against the wall for Florida to start to play well. I don't know. We'll find out very quickly this weekend against LSU. Moving on to the next game I wanted to talk about here. Clemson versus Troy. We'll start here. What's up with Clemson? The offensive line is pretty bad. I know one of their receivers was injured in the LSU game in week 1. Didn't play this week. I don't care. It's Troy. You're the Clemson Tigers. You were if not the favorite, one of the top 3 or 4 favorites to win the national championship in the preseason. And it wasn't just hype. I mean, you have what is, like, unless something drastic happens, you're going to have multiple, and I mean multiple, first-round picks off this team. And not just like potential, not just in future years, this year. Like, you have multiple players on your team that if they could declare for the NFL and go into free agency tomorrow, basically every team in the NFL would be trying to sign them, depending on how much money they would ask. You have so much talent. You have Dabo Swinney, who, yes, has struggled in the NIL era, probably hasn't adapted to the NIL era the way he should have. Actually, not probably. He hasn't. But that's off the field stuff. That's roster building. That's talent, acquisition, stuff like that. On the field, the way the games are played has not changed. And Dabo Swinney is a top 10 at the worst, probably the top 5 coach in terms of just winning games, the ability to win games. Dabo Swinney is one of the most trusted. Like, if you can somehow give everybody equal rosters, like exactly identical, just like clone an entire roster and everybody gets the exact same people, Dabo Swinney would be one of the favorites. Kirby is clearly number 1 right now. Ryan Day is up there. Dabo Swinney's not far behind. It's the guy with multiple rings, multiple trips to championships. He's still a good coach. So I don't know what's going on with Clemson. They did turn it around. They did win. Unlike Florida, they did pull it out. Probably because they didn't have a player spitting on someone in the fourth quarter when Troy was trying to tie the game. That's probably the difference in the game. I don't know. But I don't know. And that leads us into, LSU. Like, is LSU that good now? Because what if Clemson's just bad? Clemson struggled to score against Troy. So what if LSU's defense is not as improved as we thought it was because they're just slightly better than Troy? I mean, I would make an argument that Clemson's offense looked better against LSU. Now, football games, they're not, it's not a transitive thing. Like, you can't say, well, this team did this to this team, so they're for sure going to do this to this team. That's not the way it works. Florida could lose to USF and look horrible and then win out and win the national championship. It's probably not going to happen, but like you get what I'm saying. Like you can't 1-to-1 this game happened this way, so this game is going to happen this way. But I don't know. Not a good look for Clemson. Speaking of LSU, like I said, Clemson doesn't look that good. Is LSU that good? They struggled with Louisiana Tech. I know they had some injuries. I believe their center got injured. I'm not 100% for sure. I'm pretty sure it was their center. Could be wrong if it was a guard or something like that, but they had an offensive line injury, so I'm sure that impacted them. Also, you have to factor in any sport, but especially in college sports and college football, basketball, especially letdown games. College players, big win on the road against Clemson, coming home, Louisiana Tech. How seriously were they taking it? Was that a factor? I'm sure it played into it, but they've got to be better as well. Despite the fact that Florida lost at home to South Florida, you're playing Florida this coming week. I'm almost positive. You got to do better than struggling to put away. I think it was like 10-0 at halftime. I don't know. But, it's only week 2. We're not going to overreact, especially in LSU's case, because they did have the big win against Clemson. You could say it was a letdown game. And LSU had a game like this last year. Was it Louisiana Tech last year as well? I can't remember. But it's happened. There was some team last year that they struggled to put away that was a group of 5 team. And then but one of the differences in that game, if I remember correctly, like the third, fourth quarter, like towards the end of the game, they really put it away. And I think they scored a bunch of points really quickly. They kind of did. I mean, they didn't really do that this game. But I don't know. We'll see how they go going into SEC play. I'm not down on LSU now. I'm not selling stock on them, but I'm definitely not as high on them as I was. I now need to once again see it validated. I still think, regardless of what happened yesterday against Louisiana Tech, LSU, in my opinion, still a top 10 team. It's just, are they top 10 or are they top 5? Coming into this week, top 5 for sure. Now, I don't know. But they're still a playoff team regardless. At least as of right now, despite what happened to Louisiana Tech. I don't know if I'm as high on. Still very high on LSU, especially what we've seen from other teams. I mean, Florida doesn't look that good. Texas doesn't look that good. Alabama beat the hell out of Louisiana Monroe, right? That's who they played. But they looked terrible against Florida State. So who in the SEC is good? Well, actually, let me rephrase that. A lot of teams in the SEC are good. How many great teams are there in the SEC? I don't know. Georgia and LSU, conventional wisdom will tell you they're the 2 best. Then Texas and Oklahoma, probably 3rd and 4th right now, in some order. Some order of Georgia, LSU, Texas, Oklahoma. It would be my pick for a top 4 right now. They haven't necessarily looked the 4, but I'm confident Texas can at least turn it around to be better than whatever Alabama did to Florida State. And can be better than, any of these other teams, but that's right now. I don't know. But it's only week 2. We're not going to overreact. Plenty of time in the season left. We see it all the time. Teams start out bad, end up really hot. Clemson last year was a good example. Teams start out really good and end up pretty bad or pretty average. So, we'll see. But, we can only go on what we've seen. And what we've seen so far is a lot of bad throughout all of college football, especially with the teams that were preseason at the top. Moving on, just quick touch. Ole Miss versus Kentucky. I don't know what Mark Stoops has on Lane Kiffin, but whatever it is, other teams need to take note because 30-23 is not the kind of game that Ole Miss should be having against Kentucky, especially with, on paper, how those teams differ in talent, how Kentucky looked last week, how Ole Miss looked last week. But just like last year, like it literally looked identical to last year. Just change out Jackson Dart and Austin Simmons. Aside from that, the game played out almost identically. The difference is Ole Miss actually pulled it out instead of losing. And there was a questionable no call on a pass interference on a 3rd and goal for Kentucky, or 4th and goal. I can't remember if it's 3rd or 4th and goal. That maybe that changes the game. I don't know. Austin Simmons back-to-back weeks throwing 2 interceptions in the first quarter. I don't know if it was 100% the first quarter, but I don't know if last week he also threw 2 interceptions on his first 2 drives, or if it was only the first quarter. But either way, 2 interceptions in the first quarter back-to-back week. Got to be better. Lane Kiffin just can't beat Kentucky. He did technically beat them, but did not look good. Ole Miss looks like essentially the same team as they were last year, except less high-end talent. Now, overall roster talent, they're probably about the same, if not better, but like high-end, like Walter Nolan's not on this team. You know, Prince Umami Melon, or however you pronounced his last name, I apologize for that. He's not on this team. You know, the elite play at the receiver level, I don't think is on this team, at least as of right now. And despite how well Austin Simmons has played, this is his first year starting, so he doesn't have the experience of a Jackson Dart. Like, he wouldn't be a first-round pick tomorrow. Jackson Dart was. So even if the overall team talent is essentially the same, the top high-end talent is not quite as good. And I don't know. Ole Miss is in trouble. Lane Kiffin just seems to be rinsing and repeating the same thing over and over again. So has Ole Miss reached their ceiling? Like, can they get any better than what they are right now? Which is somewhere between an 8 to 10 win team, depending on how the ball. Their floor is probably 8 wins, and if they get, I don't want to call lucky, just the ball bounces their way or a call goes their way like it did in the Kentucky game, the no call on the pass interference, maybe they can win 9 or 10. Is Lane Kiffin ever going to be better than that? At Ole Miss, anyway? Could he go to Florida to replace Billy Napier? Could he go to Bama, which no way they can afford to get rid of DeBoer, but maybe they can. Maybe they can. I don't know. Final game I want to touch on from yesterday. Oregon versus Oklahoma State. Oregon beat the hell out of them. Just blew them out. 69-3 is your final score. Yes, Oklahoma State is not what they used to be. I mean, again, it's only week 2, so maybe they'll turn it around. But the last couple years just hasn't looked the way they used to be. So it's not them beating them. Oregon beating Oklahoma State is not surprising. Oregon beating Oklahoma State pretty handily is not surprising. Oregon beating Oklahoma State 69-3 is pretty damn surprising. Especially considering how, Oregon was ranked in the top 10, but how many national pundits, how many podcasts, how many TV shows had Oregon as a top 5 team, top 3 team in terms of national championship odds? How many people were picking Oregon to win the national championship? How many people were picking Oregon to even be in the Final Four? Hell, I saw plenty of people not even have Oregon in their playoff prediction. And I'll tell you this, right now, as of right now, Oregon has been the most impressive team in the country. LSU had the most impressive win, going on the road against Clemson. Shit the bed against Louisiana Tech and won 27-7, was only up 10-0 at halftime at home. Ohio State blew the doors off Grambling 70-7. Congratulations. You beat Grambling at home 70-7. played Texas, was at home, and Texas hasn't looked that great, and you beat them 14-7. And despite as bad as Texas looked in that game, Arch Manning had the ball with a chance to drive the field, and they got stopped on a 4th and goal on the 1. And many other things happened, and despite how bad Texas played, they still had a chance to win that game. And take out the 5-minute burst of offense Texas had against San Jose State, and at home would have had a chance to lose. So I'm not down on Ohio State. I think Ohio State, deserves that number 1 ranking they have right now. But I'm just saying, in terms of impressiveness, I'm most impressed with Oregon. Oregon's not my pick to win at all because Dan Lanning just struggles to win the big games, at least so far in Oregon. Aside from the Big Ten championship, when they took out Penn State last year, aside from that, and they beat Ohio State in the regular season. I know that is 2 games, but he struggled against Georgia when he's played them. He struggled against Kalen DeBoer in Washington. He struggled against Ohio State in the playoff game when it really mattered. And honestly, they probably still should have lost that regular season game against Ohio State. I don't like saying teams got lucky, but they kind of got lucky. So I don't know if I would trust Oregon in a big game, but if the championship was played tomorrow, Oregon would be pretty well suited. I don't know. Oregon looks pretty damn good to me. I understand last week they played an FCS school and beat the hell out of them, but they played Idaho last year and almost lost. And then they played a legit team. They played a legit Power 4 team, a Big 12 team, a team with a pretty good history, a team with a pretty good head coach, a team that even when they're bad is not a team that gets blown out because their coach is good enough to at least keep it close. If the spread on this game was 28.5, and my thought process was no shot does Oklahoma State beat Oregon. Oregon, if you're just looking at that game objectively, should have won that game by 30 or 40. They ended up winning it by more than that, but at least 30 or 40. But you look at that 28.5 point spread, you look at the team, you look at their history, you look at their coach, and you say, he's going to find a way to make this a 24-point loss. And he didn't. 69-3. Oregon was the most impressive team yesterday. Well, Oklahoma was probably the most impressive team yesterday, but throughout the season so far, 2 weeks in, technically 3 because of week 0, whatever. Not just because of the way Oregon's looked on the field, because of how they beat Oklahoma State 69-3, but mainly because no one was really talking about them that much. And here they are. I don't know. Very impressive win. 69-3 over a Power 4 team. That wasn't the school of the blind. That was Oklahoma State. And they looked pretty good. I don't know. We'll see if they can continue it, though. Not just with Dan Lanning, but throughout really Oregon's history. They've done things like this and then shit the bed in the important games. So we'll see if they can avoid that. But Oregon looks most impressive so far to me in terms of the entirety of the season. Oklahoma had obviously the best win yesterday. I mean, it was game day for a reason. Excited to see how they can go. Texas got to turn it around offensively. Florida, I don't know what the hell's going on there. LSU, hopefully that was a hangover game. That's what you're hanging your hat on if you're an LSU fan. What else did we talk about? Clemson, what the hell's going on, especially on the offensive line. You've got to get that corrected, especially with the way Florida State and Miami look. I don't know. But going through 2 weeks, many more things will play out, especially as we get into conference play. Things will start to even out. But I don't know. A lot of things are going to hopefully be answered. More things will be answered hopefully in week 3. But until then, we'll be back, preview week 3 later on this week. And we'll be right back here Saturday night, Sunday morning, recapping week 3 as well. Make sure you guys subscribe. Follow the podcast on all other social medias. Um, Hope you all have a good one.